$15,000, a bucket list, and a promise I made to myself. My husband Bernard passed on a Thursday in November, 3 years ago. He had been ill for a long time before that, and I had spent those years being entirely present for him in the way that you are. When you understand that time is the only thing that matters, and it is running in one direction, I do not say this for sympathy. I say it because it explains what the cruise meant. Bernard and I had talked about the Mediterranean crossing for 20 years. We had a photograph of the ship on our refrigerator for 11 of those years, torn from a travel magazine in 2009, held up by a magnet from a place we visited on a different trip. We would get there, we always said, when the children were grown, when the business settled, when the timing was right. The timing was never right, and then the time ran out. After Bernard, I gave myself 2 years of ordinary life. Grief has its own schedule, and I have always believed in respecting it. But on my 72nd birthday, I sat at my kitchen table, looked at that photograph, which I had moved from the refrigerator to my office wall, and I decided that the promise still counted even if the original person I had made it with was gone. Grandma always said, a promise made in love does not expire. It just waits for you to be ready to keep it. I booked the penthouse suite on the Adriatic Star 14 months in advance. $15,000 for a 14-day Mediterranean crossing, Naples, Dubrovnik, Santorini, Barcelona. A private balcony, a separate bedroom, a living room with windows that faced the open water. The best room on the ship. I booked it without apology because I had the means, because I had waited 20 years, and because Bernard would have told me to stop being sensible and book the room. I am not a woman who draws attention to herself. I dress quietly, I travel light, I prefer good conversation to expensive spectacle. If you passed me on the street, you would see a 72-year-old woman with white hair and sensible shoes and a canvas tote bag, and you would form no particular impression. That is fine. I have never needed to be impressive from the outside. I know what I am on the inside, and that has always been sufficient. The family in my suite did not know what I was on the inside. That was their first and most consequential mistake. I arrived at the port of Civitavecchia on a Tuesday morning in June, collected my key card from the embarkation desk, took the elevator to deck 11, and walked down a carpeted corridor toward the door marked PH1. I could hear them before I opened the door. Music, children's voices, what sounded like someone rearranging furniture. I paused, I used my key card. I stepped inside my suite. There were 5 of them. 2 adults, 3 children, a scatter of luggage that had already colonized every surface, and a general atmosphere of comfortable occupation. That suggested they had been there for some time and had not expected interruption. The man looked up from his phone, the woman looked up from a bag she was unpacking. The children did not look up at all. The explanation they gave me and the logic that was not there. The man's name was, I would later learn, Darren. He was perhaps 45, well-built, and possessed of the specific confidence of someone who is accustomed to situations resolving in his favor through the application of volume and certainty rather than reason. He stood up when I entered, which I will credit him with, though the credit runs out fairly quickly from there. He said they had been assigned the suite by the embarkation staff due to a booking issue with their original cabin, and that the matter had been resolved, and this was their room for the voyage. He said this with complete fluency, the way someone delivers a rehearsed line, which told me immediately that this was not a spontaneous explanation. He had said these words before I arrived. He had prepared them. His wife, without looking up from her unpacking, added that they had 3 children and needed the space, and that I was traveling alone, so it should not be a problem. Grandma always said, entitlement is not a personality. It is a decision made every morning to see the world as existing primarily for your convenience. I looked at the woman. I looked at the 3 children, who were now demonstrably rearranging the cushions on my sofa. I looked at the luggage on my bed and the toiletries already arranged on the shelf in my bathroom, which I could see through the open door. And then I looked back at Darren and said, very calmly, that I had booked this suite 14 months ago, that I had a confirmation number and a receipt for $15,000, and that I would be speaking with the ship's guest services immediately. Darren said that was fine, and that he was confident the staff would confirm what he had told me. He said this with the smooth assurance of someone who has, in the past, found that staff confirm whatever he needs them to confirm when he speaks to them with sufficient authority. The guest services officer was a young woman named Andrea who arrived within 10 minutes, reviewed both sets of documentation with a thoroughness I respected, and then found herself in a position that I could see was causing her genuine distress. My booking was valid, complete, and predated theirs by 13 months. Their booking appeared to have been for a different cabin class, entirely upgraded, she said carefully, at embarkation due to a processing error that she would need to look into further. And then the hotel director arrived. His name was Mr. Fontaine. He was polished, experienced, and clearly accustomed to managing conflict between passengers with the primary goal of minimizing disruption to the voyage. He looked at the documentation. He looked at the 5 Darrens arranged across my furniture. He looked at me, and he said, with genuine apology in his voice that was nonetheless serving a conclusion I found unacceptable, Mrs. Ashworth, given the circumstances, and particularly given the children involved. We wondered whether a temporary sharing arrangement for this evening might be possible while we fully investigate the phone call that changed the conversation. I want to explain something about my relationship to the Adriatic Cruise Line before I tell you what happened next. My father was one of 3 original investors in the company when it was founded in 1971. He was a shipping man who had spent -1 years in maritime trade and who recognized when leisure cruising was still a developing industry that the Mediterranean market was going to become something significant. He put 1/3 of his liquid assets into the founding partnership. When he passed, in 1994, his shareholding came to me. I have maintained it through the various corporate restructurings and partial public listings that the company underwent over the following decades at approximately 30% of the total equity. I attend the annual shareholder meetings. I have a standing relationship with the chief executive, a careful man named Mr. Verano who calls me twice a year whether or not there is specific business to discuss, because that is the kind of company relationship my father built and that I have maintained. I do not generally announce this when I travel with the line, for the same reason Helen does not announce she is the airline CEO's wife. You learn more about what something actually is when the thing does not know it is being observed, but there are moments when the information becomes necessary, and Mr. Fontaine's suggestion that I share my suite with a family of 5 was one of those moments. Grandma always said, carry your weight quietly until someone gives you a reason to set it down in full view, then set it down slowly, so everyone can see exactly how much it is. I opened my handbag. I took out my phone. I dialed a number from my contacts, not a customer service line, not a complaints department, a direct number that connects to the executive office of the Adriatic Cruise Line and is answered by a real person during business hours, because that is how my father's relationship with this company was structured and how it has remained. The call connected in 2 rings. I said, "Good morning, this is Eleanor Ashworth. I am currently aboard the Adriatic Star at dock in Civitavecchia. I am in the penthouse suite, or rather I am attempting to be in the penthouse suite, and I Would very much appreciate speaking with Mr. Verano when he is available. I said this in the same tone I used to order coffee. Conversational, unhurried, completely clear. Mr. Fontaine had gone quite still. Andrea had gone quite still. Darren, who had been watching with the confident expression of someone who expects to win, had gone a different kind of still, the kind that happens when a situation has shifted in a direction you did not model, and you are rapidly recalculating. Mr. Verano was available within 4 minutes. That is how available Mr. Verano is when I call. 4 minutes, 1 phone call, and a suite full of people who were about to move. I will not recount the full conversation with Mr. Verano, because it was partly a private business matter, but I will tell you the relevant elements. I described the situation. He asked 3 clarifying questions. I answered them. He said he would handle it personally and immediately, and that I should pass the phone to whoever was the senior officer present. I handed the phone to Mr. Fontaine. His side of the conversation consisted primarily of "Yes, sir," "I understand, sir," "Absolutely, sir," and 1 moment of extended silence during which his expression underwent a series of adjustments that I found quietly informative. He handed the phone back to me. Mr. Verano said that the matter would be fully resolved within the hour, that he was deeply sorry for the experience, and that I should expect a call from him before the ship departed. He called back in 22 minutes. The sweet question had already been resolved by then. Mr. Fontaine moved with an efficiency he had not previously demonstrated. Darren was informed, in terms that left no interpretive room, that the penthouse suite was a confirmed booking belonging to another passenger, that their occupancy of it had been an error that should not have occurred, and that their luggage would be relocated immediately to the cabin for which they held a valid reservation. That cabin was, I later learned, an interior room on deck 4 with no window and no balcony, which was the cabin class they had actually booked. Grandma always said, "The room you try to take by force is never as comfortable as the one you." And Darren argued. He argued at considerable length and volume, which the corridor outside PH1 acoustically preserved for the benefit of several other guests who had emerged from their rooms with the alert interest of people who have nothing else to do while a ship is still at dock. His wife argued, more quietly but with equal persistence. The children, to their credit, seemed largely indifferent and were primarily interested in a tablet one of them had produced from a bag. It did not help. Mr. Fontaine, operating now with the clear authorization of the company's chief executive, was a different person than the man who had suggested I share my suite 40 minutes. Earlier, the luggage was moved. The family was escorted. The door to PH1 was, at last, empty. I walked in. I set my bag down on my bed. I opened the balcony doors. The harbour at Civitavecchia's, not the most beautiful harbour in the Mediterranean, but the light on the water at that time of morning had a quality that I stood and looked at for several minutes without moving. Bernard would have loved it. I looked at it for both of us. The upgrades, the consequences, and what Mr. Verano did next. Mr. Verano's follow-up call came as the ship cleared the harbour. He expressed his apologies again with a specificity that told me he had been thoroughly briefed. He asked whether I would be willing to accept a move to the owner's suite for the remainder of the voyage, a cabin that is not listed in the public booking inventory and is maintained for company use. As a gesture of sincere apology from the line, I said I would consider it. I moved to the owner's suite that evening. It occupies the forward section of deck 12 and has windows on 3 sides. The private terrace has teak furniture and a built-in hot tub and faces forward over the bow so that when the ship is underway you see only open water ahead of you. It has a dedicated butler, a private dining option, and a wine selection that was clearly assembled by someone who knew what they were doing. It is, without comparison, the finest cabin I have ever occupied on any vessel in 50 years of occasional cruising. I mention this not to gloat but because the contrast with what happened to Darren and his family is relevant to the story's geometry. Grandma always said, the distance between the best and worst room on the same ship tells you everything you need to know about the cost of making the wrong decision. The internal review that Mr. Verano initiated covered 3 separate failures. First, the embarkation error that had allowed the family to be assigned a suite they had not booked. The staff member responsible for that assignment was found to have processed the upgrade without following the verification protocol and without confirming with the suite's existing reservation holder her employment with the line was terminated. Second, the hotel director Mr. Fontaine's suggestion that I share the suite. This was documented as a failure to follow the passenger rights protocol, which is unambiguous. A passenger with a valid, confirmed booking cannot be asked to relinquish or share their accommodation under any circumstances short of a safety emergency. Mr. Fontaine was not fired, but he was reassigned from the Adriatic Star to a smaller vessel on a less prestigious route. Effective at the end of the voyage, I was informed of this and asked if it was a satisfactory outcome. I said it seemed proportionate. Third, the family, Mr. Verano's team reviewed their booking history with the line. It emerged that this was not the first voyage on which a complaint had been filed about their conduct. There had been 2 prior incidents on different ships, one involving a disputed deck chair reservation and one involving a noise complaint from 3 adjacent cabins. Taken together with the suite occupation, the review concluded that they represented an ongoing risk to other passengers' experience. They were notified on the final day of the voyage that their account had been closed and that they would not be permitted to book future travel with the Adriatic Cruise Line, a lifetime ban for a family that had presumably planned to keep cruising. The suite they had occupied for 40 minutes cost them every voyage they had not yet taken. Santorini at sunrise, and what Bernard would have said. We reached Santorini on the 6th day. The ship anchored in the caldera at 5 in the morning and I was on the forward terrace of the owner's suite with a cup of coffee when the light came up over the cliff edge of Oya. I do not have the words for what that looks like in person, and I am not going to attempt them, because some experiences resist description and are better left to the imagination of anyone who has not yet seen them. I thought about the photograph on the refrigerator, the one Bernard and I had kept for 11 years, before I moved it to the office wall. The ship in the picture was a different vessel, but the water was the same water. The light was probably the same light. I sat with that for a long time, and it was not sad, or not only sad. It was something more complete than that. I had a second cup of coffee. I decided Bernard would have approved of the terrace. Grandma always said, the best journeys are the ones that take you somewhere you cannot fully explain when you come back. The explanation is not the point. The going is the point. I finished the 14-day crossing. Naples, Dubrovnik, Santorini, Barcelona, exactly as planned. I ate. Well, I read for books. I had dinner one evening with a couple from Edinburgh who had been cruising the Mediterranean annually for 12 years, and who had opinions about every harbour that I found. Genuinely educational. I did not see Darren and his family after the suite incident. The ship is large, enough that this requires no particular arrangement. I have booked the Adriatic Star. Again for next June. Mr. Verano's office confirmed the owner's suite is available. I have accepted. It is not the room I originally booked, and it is not the room Bernard and I had imagined when we looked at that photograph in 2009. It is better. I think that is all right. I think sometimes the promise you make and the way it is kept are allowed to be different things as long as both are real. People ask me sometimes, whether I feel that what happened to Darren and his family was too severe, whether a lifetime ban and a demoted captain and a fired staff member were proportionate to the original offence. I think about this honestly before I answer. The offence was not simply sitting in the wrong room. The offence was a system of assumptions that a woman travelling alone was a lower priority than a family with children, that a quiet older person would accept being displaced rather than cause difficulty, that the mere presence of children conferred a moral claim on whatever space was most convenient. Those assumptions had institutional support until they encountered someone who owned 30% of the institution. The consequences were not for the inconvenience, they were for the assumptions, and the assumptions deserved every consequence they received. Grandma always said, never mistake someone's gentleness for their limit. The quietest people in any room are often the ones who have simply decided that the moment has not yet required them to be otherwise. Thank you for watching. If this story found you today, I hope it gave you something useful. Know what you own, know what you are owed, and never, under any circumstances, let anyone suggest you share what you paid for, earned, and waited 20 years to finally have. Leave a comment if this reached you. Share it with someone who needs the reminder. And if you ever find yourself at anchor in the Santorini caldera at 5 in the morning, stay on deck until the light comes fully up. Every minute of it is worth the wait.